Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Joanne Harris was born in Barnsley in 1964 of a French mother and an English father. She studied Modern and Medieval Languages at Cambridge and was a teacher for 15 years, during which time she published 3 novels, including Chocolat in 1999, which was made into an Oscar-nominated film starring Juliette Binoche. Since then, she has written over 20 more novels, plus novellas, short stories, game scripts, the libretti for 2 short operas, several screenplays, a stage musical with Howard Goodall, and 3 cookbooks. Her books are now published in over 50 countries and have won a number of British and international awards. She is an honorary fellow of St Catherine's College, Cambridge, has honorary doctorates in literature from the universities of Sheffield and Huddersfield, and has been a judge for the Whitbread Prize, the Orange Prize, the Desmond Elliott Prize, the Betty Trask Award, the Prima Donna Prize, and the Royal Society Winton Prize for Science, as well as for the Fragrance Foundation Awards for Perfume and Perfume Journalism, for which she also received an award in 2017. She was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 2022. She's a passionate advocate for authors' rights and was the chair of the Society of Authors for 4 years. She was a member of the board of the Authors Licensing and Collecting Agency, ALCS, between 2018 and 2024. Her hobbies are listed in Who's Who as mooching, lounging, strutting, strumming, priest baiting and quiet subversion of the system, although she also enjoys obfuscation, sleaze, rebellion, witchcraft, armed robbery, tea and biscuits. She is not above bribery and would not necessarily refuse an offer involving perfume, diamonds, foreign travel or pink champagne. She works from a shed in her garden, plays in the band she first joined when she was 16 and lives with her husband in a little wood in Yorkshire. Joanne Harris, OBE, Fellow of the Royal Literary Society, which I will not abbreviate because I always feel like I'm going to say the letters in the wrong order. It's lovely to see you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a bit of this week together already because at time of recording, we're just back from FantasyCon where you were emceeing.
Indeed. This is why I'm still looking bleary and I've got a cup of tea.
Oh, likewise, but coffee. One of the great strategies. How did you find FantasyCon?
I thought it was great. I really enjoy cons. I don't do very many of them because my publishers tend to send me to lit fests instead, but they're very different to lit fests. And I think they're a lot more democratic in the sense that everybody, readers, writers, bloggers, publishers, they're all there together.
This is what I say to people when I'm inviting friends along, that I think for people whose only experience of conventions might be something like Comic-Con, there's no us and them, everybody's there as a person, as a writer, which if I were to send a lesson back to sort of me when I was starting out, I think is enormously valuable in itself, isn't it? That everybody's a person.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's important that we understand that it is a community, not a kind of fortress full of special people with everybody else looking up from the outside. We have a relationship with readers. We should celebrate that.
Absolutely. And I will now somewhat hypocritically, because I do agree with it entirely, say that it's something I do notice in myself, that because Chocolat was very influential to me, I do notice that those feelings that you get when you're going, oh, it's a writer, it does tend to happen to me when I've known who somebody is for a long time. I am curious, have you ever had a feeling like that about people, or were you more practical about it?
No, absolutely. I have had. I mean, there were people that I loved when I was a child, and I don't think the awe of that person goes away. I mean, when I met Ray Bradbury in LA, I just burst into tears. Fortunate, he was very old and the restaurant we were eating in was a bit dark, so I think I got away with it. But no, I did, absolutely. Everybody is overawed by somebody. Even Mr. Bradbury, who was telling me about the fan letters he was writing at that time when he was in his late 80s to the writers and illustrators of various comics he'd loved as a boy. We do pass that on.
And it's a good thing to pass on, isn't it? It's a bit like the old wisdom of turning every sorry into a thank you, that it is a case of
yes.
saying what you loved, isn't it?
Indeed, yes. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think no letter of appreciation or word of appreciation to anybody, however famous they might seem, is ever wasted, because everybody just likes to know that their words have made a difference.
Absolutely. And that link to writing is so significant, isn't it? I mean, when I spoke to you briefly at at FantasyCon, I did mention that Zozzy in the Lollipop Shoes was... I mean, I don't remember the order that the thoughts happened in, but I think although she was a baddie in terms of what she was doing with those powers, coming into contact with examples of people who understand that how we choose to show up is a choice.
Oh, absolutely. No, I loved her too. I mean, she is absolutely an evil, soulless creature. And yet she's very attractive and you kind of want to have her as a friend.
There are bits, I guess, and I say this to my clients about writing, but I certainly say it to myself about the people I come into contact with all of the time. To be fair, I say that to my clients, that there will be things that you take from everybody, as in, oh yes, piece of that's a good idea, that works, and a bit of, I'd never do that in a million years. And I think that does play into the something of ourselves in every character. It's a psychological experiment in what's that like, who am I, who is that aspect of me.
No, absolutely. And I also think there is something quite cathartic about a villain, a character who just boldly does all the things that you might personally never do because you're not a villain. But actually, there's something a bit liberating in rooting for somebody who doesn't care. And this is why children love books about naughty children.
And also naughty teenagers. Just staying with the Lollipop Shoes, there was a scene in that where Anouk realises, with spoiler-free, but where Anouk, who is younger than Zozzy, sees Zozzy using her powers. And while it is for evil in the long run, I think something else that maybe is interesting for me working with teenagers and children in writing and in drama as well is those moments where the world gets a little bit bigger because you see how somebody can use their behaviour. Mm-hmm. I think it's teenagers as well as there's something very importantly young adult in that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true. But I also think that the older adults gravitate to that as well. There is something nice about feeling liberated from rules. And if we can do it in fiction, then it's cathartic and it's not actually doing any harm to the world. It's a safe space. But this is why I think people like Zozzy, because she wants something, she has it, she does it, and she has special powers, which means that she can do things that no regular people can do at all.
And a lesson I will say I think I took for writers from that, and I will move on to more recent things and to Vianne. But the idea that probably gets in the way of a lot of the writers that I work with, and certainly me, and I think a lot of other people I know, we can be very tempted to say, well, you do know I'm this age and I haven't done such and such by now. And I think Zozzy is such a wonderful, that changing of identity. It's not about what's happened before, it's about what needs to happen next, and that the next character or the next era is as real, if you like, as the previous one. I think is a really useful psychological tool, even if we choose to do different things with it to what she does.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And Vianne, we will be spoiler free because fewer people will have had the opportunity, because we're still relatively near publication day as we're recording. How does it feel to keep returning to her? I guess going back to the beginning of her, were you learning those things for the first time? Was it filling in jigsaw pieces, or what is that like going back in a character's timeline?
Well, I never intended to go back to the character at all. I never intended to do any sequels to Chocolat. But eventually, having tried a lot of other things and found that there was no real expectation for me to do the same thing over and over again, which is what I feared initially, that Chocolat having been such a success, my publishers would want me to write Chocolat 2, 3, 4 until I dropped. And I thought, this is not going to happen. I'm going to push the boundaries and do other things. So having written in a number of other genres for 6 or 7 years, I eventually went back to Vianne and found that I had things to add to that character because life had added things to me. When I wrote Chocolat, I was the mother of a small child, and so I wrote Vianne as the mother of a small child. And later, I wrote her as the mother of a young adolescent, and I left her with the Strawberry Thief as the mother of 2 children, one who has already left home, the other who is about to. And this is a pivotal moment for anybody, and I would not have written those books in that way if I hadn't reached a point of perspective in my own life that meant that I was confident writing about Vianne's life and her experience. So I brought quite a lot of myself to that. And then I thought, where do I go after Vianne? I have travelled with her for over 27 years. Where does she go next? Because people are still interested. And people are interested, of course, in where Anouk and Rosette go next too, and they have their own stories which may or may not be told. And I thought maybe this is the time to consolidate what we know of Vian, and for Vian to look back at where she came from and to answer some of the continually unanswered questions that have been posed throughout the series, rather than moving forward. So I think in order to move forward, I needed to forensically look into Vian's past, which is why I wrote her 6 years previously to Chocolat as a 21-year-old who still doesn't know who she is, who has large gaps in her understanding of her past, who's just lost her mother, and who is in the very early stages of a pregnancy that she doesn't understand, but she knows is going to change her life.
I was going to move on and talk about other genres and other forms, but I will just quickly mention that the mother angle has fascinated me in terms of she's so, both in this character but more broadly as a writer, that we can be somewhat overawed, as I was talking about at the beginning, by who we think we're supposed to be, or who a parent figure or maybe even a culture has expected us to be, or a home environment, or whatever it happens to be. And I think listening to you talk more widely on the different genres and the different forms, one of the things that you seem very conscious of, in a way I think is very positive, of the fact that we need to find our own freedom. That when you were talking about deadlines with publishers, that they don't set the deadline for you. You say this will take as long as it takes. I'm wondering whether that was a conversation with yourself about how do I find my own identity in terms of the writer that I am. Is that something that was a conversation for you?
I think it was. I think when I finally realised that I could leave teaching to write full time, I wanted some level of security in my life. And obviously, as a writer, you can't really guarantee any security at all. But I wanted to feel that I was at least partly in charge of what I was doing, and that I wasn't going to be told what to do by publishers and when and what to write, and to be given hard deadlines. I don't work well to deadlines. They don't help me work. Generally, I work pretty fast anyway, so publishers have no particular reason to feel anxious if I don't know exactly how long a piece is going to take. But I think it's actually quite important. This is a lesson that I've learnt, that publishers are not as rigid as they may first appear to a beginning author. You know, they say things like, oh, well, we need to bring the book out at Easter at whatever time. And you think, well, okay, when am I going to finish the book? Am I confident that I am going to be able to edit the book to its needs and my needs? Do I have enough thinking time? And, I think it's absolutely fine for you to say to your publisher, I need 6 months longer to finish this book. I need a certain amount of thinking time to deliver the edits, because we all want the same thing. We all want a book that works as well as it possibly can, and that is finished to the degree we would hope it would be.
There's something in there about, it gets joked about as ask forgiveness, not permission, but actually I think there's something more than the world is not psychic. We need to say what we want, what we're capable of.
Absolutely. If you are struggling, and I can't stress this enough, then you must tell somebody. Tell somebody who can help. Your agent, your editor, your publisher. Say, I need more time. And that's fine. The longer they have to make adjustments for you in that respect, the better it will be for everybody. And if what you're afraid of is wasting people's time, holding them up, getting them to block out time to edit your book when you know it won't be ready, then that will help them too. So try to look ahead a little. But if you are struggling, people do want to help you.
I love hearing you say that, because one of the things we have on the back of the bookmark at the Writers' Gym is Say the Thing, which was first said to me by the deputy editor of a magazine that I was overthinking an article for, and it was something that the subject was very important to me, and therefore I was trying to be terribly helpful and get everything that could possibly go into it. And that was when I first heard Say the Thing, and there is no life issue that I and the Writers' Gym don't find that applies to, that you say what needs saying and you can move forward with it.
No, that's absolutely right. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say what you need. And it's also okay to set down rules, to say, this isn't going to work for me. This approach isn't going to work for me. This editor isn't going to work for me. It's okay to say all those things.
Have you ever been surprised by something either working for you or not working for you? Be that what somebody else wanted in a book, or what somebody else did, or times of day, or anything like that?
Oh, I think this kind of thing is just absolutely full of surprises. And you have to understand that the more people you work with, the more likely you are to either have to make adjustments or to make changes to the way you work with them. I think it's important to get to know the people you're going to work with so that you're not unpleasantly surprised by something. I mean, book jackets are one very good example. I've always worked very closely with the department that produces book jackets so that if I really don't like a direction they're going in, I can say so early rather than when they've expended time and energy doing something finished and then going, oh, I hate it, which is just dismissive and also unrealistic. So, trying to have a say in things and saying, I am interested in this. I would like a say in it. I would like to be consulted. I would like to go to some meetings. And, I'm just curious to see. People are very open about this and they're usually quite appreciative if you're interested in what they're doing.
Yeah, it is very much. It's also the thing, isn't it? I was reading on your website that in terms of your writing life and how you do things and what works for you, a phrase that really stuck out to me was very few ideas come to me at my desk. That something I recognise as travelling is very positive for that. Can you tell me a bit about that, how it works for you?
Well, desks are generally not very creative spaces. And there are also spaces that feel constricting in terms of movement, behaviour, view, all kinds of things. I find that most of my ideas come to me when I'm away from the desk, and I think most people will find the same. People find that when they're running, when they're walking, when they're travelling and looking out of the window, when they're listening to music, when they're reading somebody else's book, ideas will come to them then. This is important because most of a writer's writing time is actually thinking time. Maybe 10% of it happens at a keyboard where you're typing, but typing and writing are two very different things. So getting the ideas, shaping the ideas, inhabiting the world, understanding the characters, getting into character, all that stuff can be done absolutely anywhere. It's portable. So people who feel that they have to write many hours a day to call themselves writers, bear in mind that the number of words you write is not the essence of writing. It's getting and shaping and inhabiting that world, that story, until you feel confident enough to write it down.
And yet you mentioned the school desk on the website, which threw me straight back to 1996 or 7. And I am left-handed and I still do the hook, unfortunately. And I have a beautiful ink pen that goes everywhere with me that I need, and that sloping desk was a great thing for me. How did the desk stay in your life?
I bought it as a reminder of my teaching days. I was all set to buy a proper writer's desk, and I went out to look for one, and I came back with this old antique school desk instead because it just felt much more like me. I don't think I would have been happy with an acre of writer's desk, and what would I have put on it? Because I always write on a tiny laptop,
and which. I'd be being very rude to everybody listening if I didn't link that with the shed, because Twitter, you have your shed that takes on its different forms every day. For the 2.5 people out there who might not know, can you talk a bit about what I don't want to say what the shed is, because what is?
Well, the shed is many things. I wrote a whole essay about the shed for a magazine called A Certain Age, and if you look for it, you'll still find it online. But for a long, long time, I didn't have a designated writing space. A lot of people don't. Joanna Cannon wrote all her books in the car at lunchtimes when she was a medic. People write in coffee shops. I happen to write mostly on my laptop, on the floor, surrounded by my kids' toys and noise and all the other things, because most of us are not Virginia Woolf, and we can't just designate a room in the house as our study. But it's actually not the physical space that matters as much as the headspace. And so I created this imaginary headspace, which then became a real space. My shed is also real. But when I started to write about it on social media, I riffed on the idea that your headspace can be anything. It can be a flying carpet, it can be a rocket ship, it can be a box, it can be something. But what I wanted to stress was that, you don't have to wait until you have a special designated place to write, because these liminal spaces that we create, which are to do with our imagination and to which we get entry through various triggers, and my book 10 Things About Writing has a whole section about getting into the headspace. because just having the writing space isn't enough. You know, you can kind of play with this as an idea. And so for 20 odd years, I had nowhere to work. And then I had a shed. And so I wrote about it, and it changes shape every day, and it changes location. And it often reflects my whereabouts and my state of mind. And sometimes it reflects what I'm working on.
I love the ritual side of it as well, and this really came across reading about it and hearing you talk about it the other day as well, that you said something that I will now misquote along the lines of, when I have put that tweet, I mean, what is the past tense of blue sky? When I have blue skid this phrase into the world I made up this morning, you know, that sort of brings you, that I've done that, and then I'm in the zone, and brains and bodies do respond to rituals, don't they? So that lovely idea of...
They do. I think people in general are ritualistic in their thinking and their behaviour, and creative people particularly can be. And because I never have enough time, and I've never had enough time to have a long yoga session or a 5-mile run or something before I'm in a state to work, I've always tried to have shortcuts into the zone. And tweeting about or skeeting about the shed is the first one of them, because I generally do that when I'm in my writing space, and it's the first thing that I write, and then I go on to my day's work, which could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be 3 hours.
And that ritual side of things, it's something that we talk about, finding what they are for those individual people. But I guess a side of that I'm really hearing in yours is the importance of the fact that before the shed was a shed, it was, you understood it wasn't about it being a shed, it was about it being you showing up to it. And then we can make our lives based on the things we imagine. And I think this for me is why writing coaching works so well, is that what we can envisage, we are then in a position to create. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I think that there are a lot of obstacles that writers put in the way of their writing unconsciously. One is not having quite given themselves permission to do it, or to take it seriously, or to tell other people that they're taking it seriously. And one is waiting for the ideal circumstance. You know, I'll do it when I'm thin. I'll do it when I retire. I'll do it when I have a proper study with a proper desk and you know.
And when I feel confident enough.
Exactly. And these things are not important, and it's just our way of getting in the way of ourselves and our progress. But psychologically, it's extremely useful to have a designated workspace, whether that's a real space or a headspace or both, because it means that you can draw a line between your day-to-day self and all the things that it has to do and the responsibilities that it has, and your writing self, where you're alone with your book, your work, and that's the only responsibility you have.
For me, being able to shut a door was this sounds ridiculous when I say it in this term, but it was a game changer. That the person I live with now also writes, and we work from home, and we do close a door. I think it's sometimes, certainly for me and for a lot of the people I work with, it can be very helpful to hear in terms of boundaries. And, you know, as you say, a lot of people don't have a room that they can withdraw to. Is it all right to ask what's been helpful for you into either with the adults or the children in life, how to make that balance? Because I appreciate you do say that when your child was there, the writing day had ended, but anything around boundaries on time or space that meant the ideas didn't sort of swim past and you couldn't catch them because you were doing something else, because that's another big killer, isn't it? That if you don't write it down when it goes past, it doesn't come back in the same way.
It doesn't always, no. And this is why I write things in notebooks when that happens, and you try and catch what comes. Although I do find that ideas that swim past and are lost are generally not ideas I would have used anyway, because they haven't properly stuck. But yes, I think designating space and time is useful. I think too many people are worried about the amount of time they're going to spend writing every day, and they think, well, I can't possibly carve out 4 hours a day. No, you don't have to. What I tend to find is that small achievable goals work for me, and generally work for other people too. If you take an analogy with running, you do not start by running a marathon. You start by running for 30 seconds and then resting for a minute and then another 30 seconds. Writing, I think, is quite similar. So I set myself an achievable daily target of 300 words, which is not very much. You can write that in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And of course, if I want to continue, I will continue. And most of the time I write more than that. But on days when I'm travelling or I'm exhausted or it's not a useful day to do a lot of work, I find that it keeps the plate spinning. That helps me a lot. Also, if you set yourself an impossible target, very soon you will start to feel like a failure. And generally that means people stop what they're doing. They don't continue to make progress. So it's important to celebrate the fact that none of us have very much time, even the ones of us who do it for a living. And it's important to have an achievable goal. So I do that. And I also, I'm no longer afraid to set out time and go, right, for the next hour, don't bother me. Unless the house is on fire, don't disturb me. And it's important, I think, actually, not to feel alone in this. You should have supportive people around you. People who can take control of the dog, the child, the housework, the cooking, for just the small amount of time you need to take your work seriously. And if you can get people around you to understand that, then it helps a lot. So when my kid was small, I used to work quite a lot on Sunday mornings when my mother did babysitting and my husband was at work. And so I was alone in the house. That was very useful. I got a lot of work done during that relatively short interval of time. And the rest of the time, I just kept the plate spinning with a few hundred words a day.
And saying again, as we said earlier, saying the thing to the people who can help.
Yes.
Is sort of the master key, isn't it?
It really is. And I think women particularly find this difficult. Women feel that they are letting people down if they go, I need some time to myself right now. And
yet we come out of that and everybody gets more of you for their money. You come out healthier.
Absolutely. And, most people are supportive. And if they're not supportive, then my advice would be get better people.
Amen. Absolutely. You have been so active in the Society of Authors and the Authors Licensing Agency. There is obviously AI, which we cannot and should not talk about. My God, a triple negative. That I truly don't know where I want to start. I guess when you talked a bit about when you found the Society of Authors, was that an important discovery for you personally, finding
Yes,
them?
it was. It was because I think a lot of authors at the time, and some even now, felt very isolated in what they did, had no community, and had nobody to guide them, nobody with prior experience. Now, of course, it's slightly different. We have a broad writing and reading community online, and, it's very useful to be part of that and to engage. But the Society of Authors was and remains a very good place to meet other writers in different stages of their careers, to learn from their mistakes, to learn tips about publishing, about finding agents, about avoiding vanity publishers, about getting paid if somebody has stolen your work for AI, and just for expressing concerns about your work, the publishing industry, how things are going. Because a lot of people, I think, are quite worried about the future. And a lot of people entering the profession are aware that they're entering it at a very turbulent time. And it's good to have the reassurance of a professional society and to know that they are working on your behalf to try to change the things that need to be changed. So unfair contracts, obviously the use of AI, transparency with companies like Amazon who are selling books but are not really telling us anything about how many they've sold, what they've sold them for, or how much the author gets. Things like the underpricing of books being sold for pennies, advice about copyright licensing, about the PLR, all these kinds of things. You can get this information from somebody who knows. And they do have a very good department that looks at contracts for free for members. And I always run my contract past the SOA. Even now, I've got a very good agent. I've got people who look at them, but it's always good to have another pair of eyes. And I find that it's quite rare that the SOA doesn't pick up on a little thing that nobody else saw.
I have had that experience as well. And I think another thing it's worth saying about them is that the idea of the SOA can, I think, for some people fall into that black hole of things I will do when I feel like I'm a proper writer, which, of course, as we know from the shed, make your liminal space work for you. Find out if you want student membership. There's partial membership. There's ways in before you feel like you've arrived.
You don't have to be published. There are associate memberships available. And actually, they're very useful because it means that it can help you filter out the frankly exploitative people who are looking for unpublished writers and who want to take your money. I know I used to get, and I still do get, letters from people going, I've been looking for a publisher for 10 years and finally I've got an offer and it's wonderful and I only have to pay 18 grand. And I go, no, it's not an offer. This is a marketing ploy to try and make you spend money on publishing services. It is not a publishing deal. But there are some quite predatory outfits there, particularly targeting people who are older and maybe not particularly savvy about publishing. And it's quite important to get some protection and some advice.
Absolutely. And another thing I've noticed a great deal is the very close relationship between falling for that and self-esteem more generally.
Being targeted by one of these outfits does not make you stupid or naive. It makes you, unfortunately, in a large community of people who have also been targeted. And it's fine. It doesn't make you any less of a writer or any less desirable in terms of publishing. It's actually very hard to get published nowadays in any kind of traditional way, which is why so many people are going into alternative forms of publishing. And self-publishing has been completely legitimized now as a form. And it's great. It means that there are options for people who can't get into an increasingly restrictive Big Five.
What would you advise / warn people so that self-publishing doesn't lean too close? Because it can go well. There are, as with most things in life, one can do it healthily, one can do it unhealthily.
Absolutely. I think one of the things to be aware of is the very understandable excitement of having your book and wanting it to get out there. And I think a lot of self-published writers skip levels of editing and polishing and copy editing because they would like their work to be out there. But bear in mind that you only have one chance to make a first impression. And if your work is incomplete or unedited or in some way is likely to attract criticism, then you may have damaged your ability to get readers later down the line. So I see a lot of parents, for instance, pushing their 15 and 16-year-olds to publish their work online. It's not necessarily great advice.
I wrote a sentence about who I thought was the sexiest human being in the world on an internet chat forum when I was 16.
Oh, dear.
And if you know my old surname, you can still find it. So I'm just going to throw that in and say we get to grow up.
Stays there. So
absolutely.
You have all your life to make a first impression and to write a first novel. Beyond that, who knows? In traditional publishing, you have a year to write the second one, so it's always a good idea to have the second one at least ready to roll when you submit the first one. But with self-publishing, you are in control. You can choose. You can outsource your editors, your copy editors, your designers. And it's hard work. It's harder than being with a traditional publisher in many ways because they tend to provide those services, whereas you are the one who needs to outsource them and also to pay money to them too, and this is part of it. But there is no shortcut, and especially no shortcut into predatory vanity publishers who will promise you many things but who are incapable of delivering most of them.
Another thing we might want to say very loudly that, to me, surprising number of people don't necessarily notice is the ALCS and signing up for that.
Yes, that's very important. You will get an automatic membership of the ALCS if you join the SOA.
So authors licensing.
That's right. And they're an organisation. I was on their board for many years, and they're an extremely good organisation. They are there for one thing and one thing only, to protect authors' copyright and to take in on behalf of authors and then to distribute to those authors money that has been generated from use of secondary copyright. And that means things like quoting in journals, photocopying, school usage, lots and lots of secondary copyright using. And by secondary copyright, I mean anything that's not in the books that you publish. So all you have to do is to join the ALCS, or you're already a member if you're a member of the SOA. And then you need to input your new books, your titles with their ISBN numbers every year. This also goes for audiobooks. It goes for articles you may have written in magazines, anything that has an identifying number. And some people are quite surprised by the amount of money they get and the amount of times their work has been used that they weren't even aware of because it was in another country, another language. Yeah. They just don't know. Nobody else can really do it, but the ALCS have a large team, and so they give you 2 payments a year based on the money that they have collected on your behalf. It's worth getting, it's yours, it's owed to you. All you have to do is sign up for it and say what you've written and when.
Absolutely, and I would also say it's really easy to do. And this is coming from a dyspraxic who does not always enjoy forms. It's easy, isn't it?
It's very easy. It takes seconds to add a book I don't like doing forms either, but it is very well worthwhile, and it's 2 payments a year, and sometimes it's enough to pay for a nice meal out, or a nice bottle of wine, or sometimes a nice holiday, depending on how much work you have out there and how much they've collected. They also do important things like lobbying Parliament on copyright issues, putting pressure on MPs to speak out about illegitimate uses of AI, this kind of thing. So they're always there poking MPs and saying, think about our members. What are you doing to help them?
Which brings us to, what would you advise or want those of us out here to be aware of or doing about AI and its misuse?
Well, it seems a very hopeless thing, doesn't it? It seems as if it's everywhere and the perpetrators are so powerful that politicians are afraid to call them out. But actually, with the recent Anthropic judgment and the regulations that have just been imposed in Australia, we are seeing people fighting back. In Australia, whole governments are fighting back. Ours can do the same. I think this is a question that we can ask MPs as voters. What are you doing about AI to safeguard writers and creatives and that profession, which brings billions in income to the UK every year, which will be lost if AI takes over? There's that. I think there are personal things you can do. You write to your MP. If your work has been stolen, follow the Anthropic judgment, which will talk you through a rather complicated series of steps that you can take to be paid. But also, you can do personal things like make sure that your publishers are not using AI, and not just for generating work, which is a different business. Some publishers are actually AI generating illustrated children's books, which is disgraceful and should be stopped. But also, are they using AI in your translations? Are they using AI as part of your editorial process? Because you are the author and you can determine these things, you can have embedded into your contract that your work will not be used to train AI, that none of the processes of creating your book will be AI sourced when originally they were human sourced. You can do that. And if enough people do that, then the people above us, the publishers who want to make money and the politicians who want to get votes, will perhaps sit up and think that this is an issue that they need to address.
So above all, say the thing and know that it matters.
Say the thing and know that it matters. But also don't be a hypocrite. Don't say the thing, but also secretly use the thing somewhere else because it cuts corners, because ultimately this is damaging to the community.
Do what you can rather than think you're too small to matter is why fill in your articles on ALCS is another reason, other than the money.
Yes.
Self-esteem comes in so much.
Many reasons, but we have to think of writers and artists and translators and editors as part of a community. We have to help everybody. We have to be on the side of the community rather than our own side, because sometimes people kind of go, well, it benefited me. It may do in the long run, but the people you leave behind won't be benefited and the industry itself won't be benefited. So it's quite important to think of this as a holistic effort rather than just one individual's need to be compensated or whatever.
I'm wondering, of the places I have not gone yet, are there any things that have benefited you in your writing life that we haven't talked about?
I think writing is a very personal thing. The things that help one person may not help other people. In my book, there is a chapter on different approaches to getting inspiration and different approaches to getting down to work, which I often think is a bit of a problem. People often ask me about my daily process. It works for me. It may not work for everybody. But what I tend to do is I will go into my shed or wherever the shed happens to be, into my hotel room or whatever, and I will read aloud whatever I wrote the previous day or the previous time I wrote. Generally, I find that helps me get into the zone quicker. It also means that I kind of baby edit everything as it goes along, and there is a rolling process of line by line editing, which helps me a lot, which means that when I do have a final draft, it's usually pretty clean on a line by line basis. It may want some tweaking structurally, but otherwise it's a clean draft. And another thing that I always do is I use scent to get into the zone, because scent is the way I access the world primarily. This is a trick I learnt from Stanislavski in his book An Actor Prepares. And actually there isn't really anything in that book that doesn't also translate to a writer prepares, because getting into character as a performer is very, very similar to getting into character as a creator of character in stories. So pretty much all those tricks are worth exploring and looking to see if any of them work for you.
Can we have a quick moment with that scent? Because you created one for the recent book with...
Yes, I did. I got together with a scent maker called Sarah McCartney, whose company is 4160 Tuesdays. And together we made a scent illustration for a passage in the book. And we worked together to create it. It's called Vianne's Confession. You can find it on her website. And what I was doing was I was trying to explore the sense of illustrating works with things other than just pictures. Pictures are great. We all know that pictures can enhance and sometimes change our experience of a story. Adults like pictures as much as children do, although it's not as normal anymore to have illustrations in adult books. But I thought, what about other kinds of illustration? Arguably, an audiobook is a sound illustration of a work. It's an interpretation in a different medium. You have things like theatre and dance and screen that take stories and put them into another medium. Have we done scent, which to me is the most emotional and immediate of our senses? So I thought, no, okay, we could do scent has its own narrative. It has an instant impact, it has a diffusion, a delivery, and then it has a resolution. So let's do that. So I took a scene that started in a chocolaterie and ended in a church via the wet streets of Marseille in the late summertime. And so we made something that was slightly chocolatey, slightly churchy, and also with that scent of wet pavements and lots of things in there to try to see if it would lift the passage. And so when I did events, I would read the passage and sometimes diffuse the scent into the room if that was possible, otherwise pass out samples to the audience, otherwise spritz books, and sometimes people, when they came then to have the book signed. And it worked extremely well. People are influenced by scents in a way that they're not always aware of.
Yes, and the advice that is always so surprising to beginners about the fact that smell and taste and everything else is happening the whole time it's such a lovely literal way of reminding people of that. It was we had at the Olympic Studios where I was for Barnsley Literary Festival, we had the little samples, and it's as with anything that is true and works, it feels obvious once you're holding it, and yet
it does, and yet. And I find that it's interesting, and I try to encourage, if I do teach creative writing to anybody, I try to encourage people to use the full gamut of their physical experience. So not just what characters see and hear, but also what they smell, what they taste, what physical sensations are like, and be aware of that physical connection, because actually it's what draws the reader into a story. Shared connections. They may not have a shared experience with the character, but if you dwell for a time on the character's physicality, then there will be a connection, because everybody knows what sensations, what smells, what tastes, what feelings feel like. And it's an easy way to pull people into the story and to make the story immersive in a way that makes it real.
Well, Joanne Harris, it has been an absolute delight. We will have the website for Sarah McCartney, your website, the ALCS, the Society of Authors, all in the show notes.
Lovely,
and
thank you.
Thank you. It's been so wonderful to have you at the Writers' Gym. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate you asking me. Thank you.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr. Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.